Honourable Tamatha Paul.
Kia ora, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to to make our thoughts known about the gang bill. What I want people to understand about this bill and about the government's attack on gangs is that it is simply a marketing exercise. It is a PR strategy to look tough on crime, but does nothing to make our communities tangibly safer. It does nothing to address the reasons why people join gangs in the first place, and does nothing to reduce people's reasons as to why they join gangs. It will not increase public safety, but it will result in people being put into prison and for longer, and to increase the length of those sentences due to their affiliations with gangs. And the main point that we want to make, and the main point that research and evidence has made over the years, is we cannot arrest our way out of the gang problem. So let's start with who are in gangs in the first place, because that's something that we never talk about in this House. The contributing factors to people joining gangs in the first place are simple. 3 things: poverty, trauma, and colonisation. And the reason that I say that is because many people join gangs because they genuinely believe that that is their only pathway towards having any money, because those who join gangs often come from the most highly deprived communities where there aren't job opportunities, where the only opportunity that you have is actually to be on the benefit because there are no jobs in those communities. And so if you're faced with the task of having to put food on the table and pay your bills, sometimes the only option you might have is to join a gang. And you need only to watch Dave Lettelli's series on gangs, which is on TVNZ for free, where he talks to gang members, and often they talk about the driving factor that poverty played in them joining gangs in the first place. The second reason that people are in gangs is due to the trauma and the abuse that they had experienced as children. And we know that because 80 to 90% of gang members experienced abuse in state care. And we know that because we had the report, the largest Royal Commission inquiry in the history of this country, looking into abuse in state care, that said that 80 to 90% of those gang members have experienced harm at the hands of the state. The other reason that people join gangs are, of course, the impacts of colonisation. And the reason that I say that is because 75% of gang members are Māori. So we understand the drivers of gang membership. It's poverty, it's trauma, and it's the impacts of colonisation. And that is backed up in the regulatory impact statement on this bill. And I want to read the quote. A significant portion of gang members have also been victims of violence, poverty and neglect, including family violence, intimate partner violence, and drug or alcohol abuse. While these elements exist in all communities, gangs serve as a concentration zone for individuals with a higher risk of exhibiting antisocial behaviour. These individuals tend to live in the most deprived communities and have high rates of unemployment. We need to look at the reasons why people feel that they need to join gangs in the first place. If we want to reduce people joining gangs in the first place, if we want to reduce that gang membership, then we have to look at the reasons why people join them in the first place. Now, the other reason that we don't support this bill is because it completely ignores people's human rights. And I completely agree with my colleague, the Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb, that human rights are afforded to people by virtue of being human beings. Just because you are a gang member, or just because you're in prison, or just because this House has designated you as being less worthy of human rights, you are still entitled to your human rights. And this bill completely flouts human rights. Let's talk about how it does that. The freedom of expression. When has it ever been acceptable, and I think this is good for the ACT Party to listen to this as a party that claims to champion human rights and the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech. When has it ever been acceptable for the government to tell people what they can and can't wear? There's no precedent for that, yet this one creates that. The freedom of peaceful assembly. If there are a group of people who are together, gang members or not, if they're not committing a crime, then why can't they be together in a public place? And again, the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. This bill means that more people will be subject to unfair and unreasonable searches. And now you look at some of the changes that have been made to this bill throughout the process, like Section 8A, which talks about the possession and simply possessing a patch within your home. That is a massive government overreach for the government to determine what you can and can't have in your home. That has nothing to do with public safety. How are the public even meant to be intimidated of something that they can't even see and are not even impacted by? This bill, in my eyes, is about persecuting Māori, because all gangs have not been treated equally in this bill. And we just heard about that at question time. What about white supremacists? What about swastikas? What about other white supremacist symbols? They haven't been prohibited as part of this bill, but they cause fear and intimidation. Where's their mention in this bill? That's because there is none, because they're not mentioned in the gang list as part of this bill. And the gang insignia doesn't include some of the most offensive symbols in this country. I want to mention something that was in the regulatory impact statement on this bill again. And it says, the advice on this bill, targeting gangs will affect Māori and their whānau the most. As is reflected in the research, gang members are disproportionately young, male, live in more deprived communities, and as noted in the overview, 3/4 of those on the national gang list are Māori. Any policies that impact gangs will therefore disproportionately impact Māori. And we know that international application of some of the powers in this bill, for example, the non-consorting orders, have been used disproportionately against young Indigenous people, as I have made that point repeatedly throughout this bill process. We're worried about the police's ability to actually implement this bill, but we're also worried about the police's ability to be able to distinguish what is gang insignia and what isn't gang insignia. If they see, I made this point earlier this morning, if they see a bulldog as is associated with the mongrel mob, but it's actually a Canterbury Bulldogs t-shirt, are they going to think that that's a gang insignia? If they see a fist, which is associated with black power, are they going to think that that is a gang insignia when it could be something completely innocent and unrelated, such as a Black Lives Matter t-shirt or a workers' rights t-shirt? If they see a skull on a t-shirt, and that person is Māori, could they assume that that was a headhunter's logo? We feel like it hasn't been clear enough about what constitutes gang insignia. So, to summarise, we need to stop treating lawmaking as a PR exercise. If the government is serious about reducing gang membership, they need to look at the research and the evidence as to why, actually the research and the evidence as to who makes up gang members and what the drivers of that membership are, and address those, as opposed to having this bill that will only result in more people being in prison, more wasted human potential and does not make our communities any safer. Thank you.